The late September sun hung low over Westbrook High School, casting long shadows across the sprawling, sun-bleached football field. Inside the sprawling brick building, the final period of the day was winding down, a fact celebrated by the low, anticipatory hum of students eager for the 3:15 bell. In the sophomore English classroom, however, the only sound was the droning voice of Mr. Henderson, who was passionately dissecting the symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Most students stared out the window or doodled in their notebooks, their attention spans having evaporated hours ago. All except for one. In the back row, seated by the window as she always was, sat Eliza Eli Carter. She was a slight girl with intense, intelligent eyes the color of the Wisconsin dells and a cascade of dark hair she usually kept pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Today, as was the case almost every day, she wore a pair of durable, well-worn combat trousers and a long-sleeved thermal shirt under a lightweight jacket in a digital woodland camouflage pattern. The outfit was clean and practical, but on a teenager in a suburban high school, it stuck out like a sore thumb. A piece of chewed-up notebook paper arced through the air and landed on her open textbook. Eli didn't flinch. Without looking up, she calmly unfolded it. "Nice costume, G. Jane. Going to a war after school? Or just to the library to look at more pictures of guns?" The note was written in jagged, looping letters and smelled faintly of cheap body spray. Eli recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Kelsey Madison, the reigning queen of the junior class and the self-appointed arbiter of all things cool. Eli slowly crumpled the paper and slipped it into her jacket pocket, her expression unchanging. She returned her gaze to the window, watching a flock of geese fly in a perfect V formation toward the horizon. She'd learned about formations like that from her father. They flew that way to conserve energy, to share the burden of the long journey. It was a lesson in teamwork, in looking out for one another. It was a lesson the kids in this school would never understand. The final bell finally screamed to life, and the classroom erupted in a cacophony of shuffling books, slamming lockers, and chattering voices. Eli packed her bag with practiced efficiency, every item in its precise place. As she walked into the crowded hallway, she was immediately a ghost. Kids pushed past her without a second glance, their conversations washing over her. "Did you see the game last night? Oh my God, I cannot believe what she posted on Insta. Dude, I am so failing that history test." Eli moved against the tide, her posture straight, her gaze fixed ahead. She was used to the invisibility. It was easier that way. "Hey, Sergeant Major," a voice called out, loud enough to turn heads. It was Tyler Hoffman, the varsity quarterback, leaning against a bank of lockers with his usual entourage of teammates. "Think you can get us some of those MREs? I heard they have little Tabasco bottles in them." His friends snickered. Tyler was handsome in a generic, all-American way, and his word was law in the social hierarchy of Westbrook. He wasn't outright cruel, not like Kelsey, but his casual mockery was a constant low-grade fever in Eli's school life. Eli paused and looked at him. She could have told him that MREs stood for meals, ready to eat. She could have told him that her dad had once gone 3 weeks straight on nothing but them during a training exercise in the Korean wilderness. But she just gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head and continued walking. "Don't hurt yourself saluting, Carter," Tyler called after her, earning another wave of laughter. Eli's camouflage wasn't a cry for attention. It was a shield. It was the closest thing she had to her father, Chief Warrant Officer 2 David Carter, who was, at that very moment, over 4,000 miles away on a Black Hawk helicopter, soaring low over the thick, humid jungles of a country she couldn't pronounce. It was a uniform, a symbol of duty and service, and wearing it made her feel closer to him. It was her way of saying, "I'm here, I'm waiting, I'm a part of this too, even if you can't see me." She walked out the side doors of the school, away from the bustling parking lot where students hopped into shiny SUVs and jacked-up pickup trucks. Her path led her toward the edge of the campus, past the bleachers and the practice fields, to a small patch of woods that bordered a quiet residential street. This was her walk home, a solitary 10-minute journey. Today, however, something was different. A low, familiar sound began to vibrate in the air. It started as a distant thumping, a rhythmic beat that she felt more in her chest than heard with her ears. Eli stopped dead in her tracks. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear, but with a surge of raw, visceral recognition. Thwup, 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 thwup. The sound grew louder, more insistent, shaking the leaves on the trees. It was a sound that had been the lullaby of her childhood, the soundtrack to her father's comings and goings. It was the unmistakable rotor wash of a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. She looked up, scanning the sky, and then she saw it. A dark, menacing silhouette against the hazy afternoon sun, its dual rotors chewing through the air with incredible power. It was descending, its nose dipping slightly as it lined up for an approach. It wasn't heading for the National Guard armory on the other side of town. It was heading directly for Westbrook High. For a moment, sheer disbelief rooted Eli to the spot. Then, instinct took over. She broke into a run, not away from the noise, but toward it. She sprinted back across the practice fields, her backpack thumping against her spine, her eyes fixed on the descending aircraft. Back at the school, the scene was one of pandemonium. Students who had been loitering in the parking lot were now frozen, their phones held aloft, capturing the impossible sight. Teachers rushed out of the building, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. Tyler Hoffman, who had been revving his engine in his Ford F-150, killed the motor and stepped out, his jaw hanging open. Kelsey Madison, mid-text, looked up from her phone and gasped, the device nearly slipping from her perfectly manicured fingers. The massive Black Hawk, its dark green paint job scuffed and weathered, hovered for a moment, its rotors kicking up a furious cloud of dust and dead leaves, turning the air into a gritty hurricane. Students shielded their eyes and stumbled backward. The noise was deafening, a mechanical roar that drowned out every car alarm, every shout, every thought. It was a beast from another world, descending into the mundane reality of their suburban high school. With a gentle bump, the helicopter touched down directly on the 50-yard line of the meticulously manicured football field, its skids sinking slightly into the turf. The rotors slowly began to wind down, the pitch of the engine decreasing from a scream to a powerful whine. A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by the diminishing whine of the turbines and the distant wail of police sirens heading their way. The side hatch of the Black Hawk slid open with a heavy metallic clang. Two soldiers in full combat gear, their faces smeared with camouflage paint, jumped out and took up positions on either side of the open door. They were not here for a recruiting visit, they were here for a reason. Then, a figure emerged. He was tall and lean, his back ramrod straight despite the heavy pack he carried. He wore the same camouflage pattern as Eli, his flight suit dusty and creased from long hours in the air. He had a thick beard, a face weathered by sun and wind, and eyes that scanned the crowd of stunned teenagers with an intensity that silenced even the boldest among them. He didn't see Tyler's truck or Kelsey's designer clothes. He didn't see the football field or the brick school building. He saw only one thing. He saw a girl in a camouflage jacket, standing alone at the edge of the track, her face wet with tears, her hand pressed to her mouth. Chief Warrant Officer 2, David Carter, took a step forward. His voice, rough from disuse and thick with emotion, boomed across the silent field. "Eli!" The name hung in the air, powerful and absolute. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration. 1,000 thoughts raced through the minds of the students. The camouflage girl, the one they called a wannabe, the joke, the ghost, this battle-hardened soldier, this warrior who had just descended from the sky in a machine of war, was here for her. He was her father, and he had come home. Eli stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, blurring the image of the man she hadn't seen in 11 months. Her legs felt weak. She took one hesitant step forward, then another. She couldn't feel the ground beneath her feet. Tyler Hoffman stared, his face a mask of shock and dawning shame. The MREs he had joked about were the rations this man ate while serving his country. The salutes he had mocked were the gestures of respect this man had earned. Kelsey Madison's face was pale, the crumpled note she had written hours earlier burning a hole in her memory. G.I. Jane. The girl she had tormented was a hero's daughter. Mr. Henderson, the English teacher, watched with a look of profound realization. He saw the girl from the back of his class, the quiet one he had never challenged, never truly seen, and understood in a flash of clarity the depth of his own failure. Eli began to run. She ran past the stunned faces, past the line of teachers, past the soldiers standing guard. She ran onto the sacred turf of the football field, the grass trampled by the skids of a war machine. Her father dropped his heavy pack and opened his arms. Eli crashed into him, a small figure engulfed by a father's embrace. He lifted her off the ground, holding her tight, burying his face in her hair. He whispered something in her ear that no one else could hear, but everyone understood. He was home. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of shock, it was the silence of respect. No one laughed, no one whispered. For the first time they saw her, really saw her, not as the weird girl in the strange clothes, but as Eliza Carter, a military kid, a daughter of a warrior, a girl whose camouflage wasn't a costume but a promise kept. The sirens grew closer, and the school administrators would soon have to deal with the chaos of a Blackhawk on their football field. The police would have questions. The news crews would arrive with their cameras. But in that single, suspended moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the quiet girl in camouflage, finally and truly home. The following days at Westbrook High were unlike any other. The story of the Blackhawks' landing spread like wildfire, morphing and growing with each retelling. It was on the local news, the regional papers, and all over social media. For the students, the initial shock gave way to a strange, collective self-awareness. The helicopter was gone, airlifted out by a support crew before sunset, but its ghost seemed to linger on the 50-yard line, a permanent reminder of their collective misjudgment. For Eli, life didn't magically become perfect. Her father was home, but the specter of deployment still loomed. He was on leave, a temporary reprieve from a world of duty and danger. The joy of his return was tempered by the unspoken knowledge that he would have to go back. However, the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. On the Wednesday following the landing, Eli walked into the school cafeteria. The usual roar of conversation seemed to dim slightly as she passed. She felt the weight of hundreds of stares, but they felt different now. They weren't dismissive or mocking. They were curious, respectful, even awed. She moved toward her usual solitary table in the corner, a small formica-top island of solitude in a sea of social activity. But before she could sit down, a voice stopped her. "Eli?" She turned. It was Tyler Hoffman. He was standing a few feet away holding a tray of food, looking profoundly uncomfortable. The arrogant quarterback was gone, replaced by a teenage boy grappling with a guilty conscience. His friends lingered behind him, watching with an intensity usually reserved for the fourth quarter of a championship game. "Hey," Tyler said again, his voice low. He walked closer, ignoring the whispers that erupted around them. Can I talk to you for a sec?" Eli regarded him with her usual calm, unreadable gaze. She gave a slight nod. Tyler took a breath. "Look, what I said the other day about the MREs and all the other stuff before that, it was stupid. It was really, really stupid and disrespectful." He swallowed hard. "I saw your dad. I saw that helicopter, and I realized I don't know anything. I don't know anything about what you're going through, what your family goes through. I wanted to say I'm sorry." The cafeteria was dead silent. Every ear was tuned to their conversation. Eli looked at him for a long moment. She saw the genuine regret in his eyes, the uncomfortable fidget of his hands. She could have made him squirm. She could have walked away, but that wasn't who she was. "My dad has been gone for 11 months, she said, her voice quiet but clear. "He's missed birthdays, Christmases, parent-teacher conferences. My mom works 2 jobs and tries to hold it together and pretends she's not scared every single time she sees a news report about the Middle East. I wear this," she said, gesturing to her camouflage jacket, "because it makes me feel like I'm close to him. It's my uniform." Tyler nodded, his face pale. "I get it. I mean, I don't, not really. But I get that I was a jerk." Eli studied him. "Yeah, you were," she said. A flicker of something, not quite a smile but not a frown, crossed her face. "But thanks for saying that." A small ripple of released tension went through the cafeteria. Tyler, looking immensely relieved, nodded again and turned to go back to his table. But then he stopped and turned back. "Hey," he said a little louder. "You want to sit with us? I mean, you don't have to, but the offer's there." It was a huge gesture. Tyler's table was the nexus of the school's social universe. An invitation to sit there was a social coronation. Eli looked past him at the table full of popular kids, all watching her with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She then looked at her own lonely table in the corner. It would be so easy to accept, to finally be on the inside. She shook her head. "No thanks, Tyler, but I appreciate it." She didn't go to her corner table either. Instead, she walked to a table in the middle of the cafeteria, where a group of quiet, unremarkable kids sat. The band kids, the anime club members, the ones who, like her, usually existed on the fringes. She sat down in an empty chair. A girl with braces and glasses smiled at her shyly. Eli smiled back. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes. She didn't need their validation. She had something far more valuable, her own identity, forged in the crucible of a life she hadn't chosen, but had learned to live with pride. Later that week, a school assembly was called. The principal, a flustered man named Dr. Albright, who was still fielding calls from the Pentagon and the local news, had decided to address the incident. To everyone's surprise, he invited a guest speaker, Chief Warrant Officer 2, David Carter. Eli watched from the front row as her father, now clean-shaven and wearing his dress uniform, stood behind the podium in the school gymnasium. He looked magnificent, a wall of polished brass and immaculate fabric. "I'm not here to talk about the military," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the large space. "I'm here to talk about my daughter." He looked down at Eli, and a genuine, warm smile broke through his stoic expression. 11 months ago, I kissed my little girl goodbye. I told her I'd be back. And I know that for those 11 months, while I was doing my job, she was doing hers. Being a military kid is its own kind of service. It's a life of moving, of saying goodbye, of worrying, of holding down the fort at home. It's not easy, and it's not something a lot of people understand. He scanned the sea of young faces. Kids like Eli, they live in 2 worlds. They go to your schools, they sit in your classes, but a part of them is always somewhere else, wondering if their mom or dad is safe. They don't ask for your pity, but they deserve your respect. He paused, letting his words sink in. I've flown helicopters in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. I've been shot at. I've been in crashes. I've seen things I hope none of you ever have to see. But I can tell you, walking onto that field the other day and seeing my daughter standing there, wearing that jacket, his voice caught for a moment. That was the scariest and the proudest moment of my life. Scary because I realized how much I'd missed. Proud because I saw that she was strong. She was tougher than any of you could possibly imagine. The gymnasium was silent. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, spontaneous, and genuine. It wasn't for him, not entirely, it was for Eli. From that day on, Eli Carter was no longer the camouflage girl. She was just Eli. Kids said hi to her in the hall. Teachers called on her in class and listened to her answers. Tyler Hoffman never bothered her again. Once, she even caught him nodding at her respectfully in the hallway. The camouflage jacket, once a source of ridicule, became a symbol. A few weeks later, a freshman came to school wearing his late grandfather's old Air Force flight jacket. He walked through the halls with his head down, expecting the worst. The first person he saw was Eli. She looked at the jacket, then at his nervous face. She gave him a small, understanding smile and a thumbs up. He smiled back, standing a little taller. Eli never became the most popular girl in school. She never wanted to be. But she had found her place. She had a small group of genuine friends, a renewed sense of pride, and most importantly, she had her dad, even if it was just for a few more weeks. When her father's leave ended and he had to return to duty, it was still hard. The goodbye at the airport was just as painful as the last one. But as Eli watched his plane disappear into the sky, she didn't feel the same crushing loneliness. She felt a solid, quiet strength. She stood a little taller, her shoulders squared. She was Eli Carter. She was a military kid, and she was proud. The camouflage she wore wasn't just a promise to her father anymore. It was a badge of honor she wore for herself, a quiet testament to a resilience the students at Westbrook High were only just beginning to understand.